Welcome to Full Faith, Empty Arms, a podcast for those walking the difficult road of infertility, especially within the context of faith. I'm Shannon Adams, here with my dear friend Pam Denison, and our hope is to create a place where honest conversations can happen, where hard things can be spoken out loud, and where no one has to feel quite so alone. If you pressed play today, we know it might have taken a little bit of courage. Infertility can be deeply personal, isolating, and painful, especially within the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where family is such a central part of life and identity. The idea behind Full Faith, Empty Arms is that both can exist at the same time. It's possible to love God, to have meaningful faith and hope, and still struggle, grieve, and have very real pain. There are many forms of infertility, and while this may not have been a path you chose, we're really glad you found us. We hope these conversations feel a little bit like sitting down with friends who understand. Welcome, everyone. We thought for our first episode today that Pam would interview me, and I'll share my background and some of my story and a little bit of why we're doing all this. And then for our next episode, she'll do the same. And then we're hoping to bring on many guests who are willing to share their own stories, their own journeys, and just provide a place where we can support one another. Pam and I have been dear friends for a long time. She's in Texas. I'm in Georgia now, but I lived out there in Texas for many years, which is where we met, out in Fort Worth. We did our young single adult period of life together for a bit, and she is one of my favorite people ever, truly one of my heroes. So I am very grateful that she was willing to take on this podcast project with me. Our lives are very different, but we also have a lot in common, and I have learned so much from Pam just in watching her go through some of the things she's gone through. So Pam, I am just glad you're here. I love you, and you are the right person to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm happy to be here with you too. Let's talk about you. I know, always a hard question first. Let's start with what led you to create this podcast?
I have struggled with infertility for many years. It's been 10 years, and it's tough. It's hard. I've gotten to a much better place, I guess you would say, now than, in the first several years. Just, time helps, perspective helps, but it's still not easy. And particularly at church and within, the church context and even the broader gospel context, there can be a lot of pain, and it feels often very isolating, and it's not something you go around talking about. And so I just felt I felt like I wanted to provide something that was a resource to help other people, just to feel not so alone and isolated and all, because it's hard. So even when on the outside we look like we're just going along with life just fine, that doesn't mean that we don't have our own private struggles and pains. And sometimes just hearing other people's stories can help lessen the isolation of it all.
So tell me a little bit about what your journey has looked like.
So I married a little bit later in life. I was 35 when my husband and I got married, and we both came from larger families. He was in a family of 10 kids. I was in a family of 5 kids, and he's a few years older than I am. And we were eager to start a family right away, and it just never happened. We just had our 10-year anniversary. So it's been 10 years of hoping, trying all the stuff, wishing, praying, fasting. We have not adopted. We haven't done any fostering, and we have not gone through any IVF treatments. So those are some of the big decisions that, you face when you're going through infertility. Are you going to do these things, or which path are you going to go? And we have not taken any of those routes. We have started down a few of those routes and felt like it wasn't the right thing at the time. So, yeah, it's just us, and we're getting older and still trying to figure things out. We think at some point we both feel like our there will be a way that a family will come together for us. We're just trying to really trust in the Lord and be prayerful and be responsive to the Spirit and to opportunities that come up. And I don't know what the future will look like, but that's where we are right now. So I do have some health factors that have contributed, probably most likely, to my infertility. I have endometriosis, so there's definitely some scar tissue that has been a factor. Although I do have one open tube, so and I've had two surgeries to take out that scar tissue, which is, my doctor said is supposed to help the fertility possibilities. Didn't do anything for us, but so, and then I have some autoimmune stuff going on too, which may or may not be a factor. Probably is, because my hormones have taken a big hit. But neither of those things are like a definite reason for the infertility. So, like, there's still plenty of people with endometriosis, plenty of women that get pregnant, and it actually helps their condition. There's plenty of women with Hashimoto's and Addison's disease that have had children. And yeah, you might have to do things a little bit differently, but it's definitely happened. So it's not like those conditions rule out pregnancy for me. So there's not a completely clear cut explanation for it. But I have gotten to a place where, obviously, like, I'm willing to talk about it in a public forum here. And I don't know if it's easier to deal with, but I've been able to process a lot more of it in a way that doesn't feel as heavy as it used to feel. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, yeah, 10 years of trying. I've never had a positive pregnancy test. So I've never had a miscarriage that I'm aware of. If anything happened, it was in very, very early stages. So my cycle has been very predictable always. So I've had a few times where I've been maybe a week late, and of course those are times when your brain starts going crazy, and then the really bad cycle hits. So anyway, that's kind of my infertility journey so far in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it seems weird or crazy to you to not ever have gotten pregnant, but I know for me that was like, how is that even possible? Like, how is it possible to not even get pregnant at all over 10 years? It's kind of mind-boggling for me.
Yeah, and
So,
especially when people around you are just having babies left and right, or people who are not planning on it or not even wanting it or whatever. Like, the fact that it happens so naturally and easily for, like, most people is mind-boggling. It's
yeah.
and yeah, sometimes people make those comments about how amazing a woman's body is and what it can do and what it can go through and just how miraculous that all is. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, that would be miraculous if my body would do that. So it's good for you to recognize that that's a miracle. And honestly, there are so many things that are miraculous about our bodies. I mean, the fact any level of health that we have is something to celebrate and be grateful for, and how our bodies work and all the amazing ways they do is a miracle all of its own. But that whole reproductive piece is, yeah, kind of mind-boggling about how it does work for other people so easily.
You hear about people, oh, it was my first time and we only did it once, and then they're pregnant. And I'm just like, how? It just, yeah.
Oh,
But I thought there was something very wrong with me that I had never gotten pregnant. Now I've heard of several people that have gone through the same thing that have just forgotten pregnant in decades of marriage. So it just, it seems almost impossible, but it happens, unfortunately.
yeah. And I think
So,
it's much more common than people realize. I don't know the
yeah.
stats, but I mean, chances are someone in your circle is struggling with this, whether you're aware of it or not, or has recently struggled with it, or it's much more common than ever gets talked about in public dialogue, I think.
Have you ever had anyone say how blessed you are to have not gotten pregnant and have to not deal with a miscarriage?
There have been times where I have actually felt that, like, oh, maybe it's better that I haven't ever gotten pregnant. Maybe I've been spared a lot of pain by not having to go through a late miscarriage. Although there have definitely been many cycles that have been so physically painful and excruciating that I have wondered, is this the type of pain that you have when you're having a miscarriage? And even though I never had that positive result, I also mostly gave up on testing a long time ago because that just was not something that was ever helpful. So, um, who knows what may have happened on any random month. I've definitely had a lot of pain with my cycles over the years, and that kind of goes along with endometriosis. But no, never a established pregnancy or miscarriage that we've been aware of.
Sometimes I'm like, would I have been able to handle going through a miscarriage, going through that hope of being pregnant and then losing it? So sometimes I think maybe the Lord spared my feelings that way, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I think it's important for us to say too, like this whole realm of infertility is so, it can look like so many different things. I mean, the people who've had miscarriages, people who haven't, people, who finally have the kid but then continue to struggle with infertility after that. That's still a pain for them, or a stillbirth. It can just There's just so many different scenarios that infertility can unfold in. And so, yeah, you and I kind of have this in common of just the never getting pregnant, but there's so many women that, yeah, go through those really hard miscarriages over and over, or just, have other complications or challenges that make it really hard. And so, yeah, it all is hard and painful, and it's weird because we can relate to the stuff that we go through, right? But we can't relate to the stuff that other people go through unless it's, the same experience we're having. And so I don't know, I feel like
Yeah, yeah.
I can relate to you in a lot of ways, but I can't relate to someone who's had a miscarriage as far as what that is like physically, and the pain that is. So, but anyway, it's all hard, and it's all we can do is just support one another. We don't have to be able to relate to someone else to be a friend, and to just be kind and be supportive, however that needs to look. So anyway.
You mentioned how infertility looks so different in everyone, and I guess I didn't think about this. But I know my sister-in-law, they had one kid and then she had a couple miscarriages and hasn't been able to have any more. And I know that was a struggle for her, and I never, for, I guess at the time I was like, oh yeah, she's having fertility issues, but I just, I don't know, didn't think of the struggle as much as what she might be going through.
Yeah, that's a challenge there too that so many women go through. So we don't want those women to feel excluded, from this type of discussion, because it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. No, they definitely have pain and struggle in that as well. How would you say your faith has changed through 10 years of dealing with infertility?
So early on, I felt like my faith was mature in some ways, as far as, I understood that things don't always work out, that we're not allowed to be spared every heartache in life, that we have to be tested, we have to be tried, and we have to turn to the Lord to find help and peace, and have that anchor, through it all. I'd experienced enough of life to really feel like I had a really deep and grounded relationship with him. But I think I also just had faith that things were gonna work out, and that it was just a matter of time, and I just needed to be patient. And any day now, any week now, any month now, it was gonna happen, and our family would start growing. And now, I mean, the last few years, I think I have learned and focused a lot more on just having faith in God, and in who he is, and in his goodness and his love, and in what my relationship is to him as his precious child. And so if I anchor my faith in that, then I don't have to worry about how that's going to ripple down and what that means for this or that or this situation or that challenge. I can just trust that he is my father, and that his plan is the perfect plan. And if I am trying to stay with him and follow him and do my best to keep my covenants, that he's got my back and it's going to work out. So I would say my faith has matured in that way, that I'm not. I'm not as focused on outcomes, on, well, what's this going to look like? How's this going to go? What's the, how's the story going to unfold here? And praying for specific things to be the outcome. I'm just much more focused on trusting him and who he is and why he sent his son to die for me, and just, the message of the gospel that I can be redeemed through Christ, and the kids, the family, the infertility, all that, like, it'll be resolved some way, somehow. So I guess that's how my faith has changed throughout the journey so far.
Yeah. It's great that you can still hold on to that trust in him. I think that's the biggest thing that keeps me going sometimes, is just holding on to that trust that he loves me. I'm his daughter and he knows what's best for me. So that's what keeps me going. Let's see. You wrote a book. I read it. I thought it was great. Tell me a little bit about your book.
So it's still in the works, but about 5 years ago, I was just having a really bad night, and I was laying in bed just trying to get through it, and I just had this prompting that I needed to share my experience, and that meant I needed to start writing. So I got up right then and went to my computer, and I wrote for a couple hours, and I just started processing and writing down my experiences and feelings about it all. And I would I would work on it for, maybe a few weeks at a time, and then I would be away from it for like months or longer even. And then I'd come back and work on it, just because it was it was kind of a hard project to stay focused on, just because it is such a heavy topic. So I didn't always just want to be in that space of, let me process how hard this is, and, write about it all the time. So anyway, I spent 5 years kind of writing off and on, and then I finally, just in the last few months, got to a point where I was like, if I'm ever going to share this, I need to pull it together and, finalize it and figure out how to put it out in a way that other people can benefit from. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to figure out, publishing routes and the best way to do that. And so it'll probably still be a while before it's available, but it's called Full Faith, Empty Arms. That hard night when I was lying in bed, that was what came to me immediately, that was the title. And so that's kind of the focus that I've had since then, of just acknowledging that I can still believe, I can trust in God, I can be active in his church and his gospel, I can be in good standing with him, and I can still have these, painfully empty arms. And those two things can coexist, and that doesn't mean anything is wrong. So that's kind of the premise of, just what the book is about. And yeah, hopefully in the next few months I'll have some updates on the path that's going to take for how to be available and how I can get it out there. So that's the book.
Great. Great. I think everybody should read it. I think it's great. Now, you've been talking about doing a podcast for a little while. What was your tipping point of saying, okay, let's do this?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So this is definitely outside of my comfort zone. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not someone who wants to put myself out there and like share all this super deep emotional stuff with just the world. But I have just felt compelled that it needs to be shared, and there needs to be a place for people to come and hear stories and have a way to connect with others. And there are some resources out there, like there's some Facebook groups and some blogs that I have found more recently. I will say, like 5-ish years ago, I was looking for resources, and I just couldn't find anything hardly, about women in the church going through infertility. It was like maybe a paragraph in a chapter of a book that was about trials or something, or just little references here and there. But also, a lot of that was in hindsight, of people saying, yes, this was hard, but this is how we got through it. And this is, what it looks like now. And it was like the resolution was all, neat and tidy. And the answer had been reached. And, anyway, I felt like it was important to share what it looks like from inside the trial before you get to the resolution when you're in that refiner's fire of sorts. So that was a big part of like writing the book too. I didn't want to wait until we'd figured out how to create a family, or the timing was right as far as bringing kids in or whatever it is. Like, I wanted to share like that messy part of, yeah, this is hard, this is painful, this is this really sucks, but I'm not giving up on the Lord. And I think that's a message that is in need of being shared, because like you said, I think there are a lot of women who have stepped away from their activity in the church just because of how painful it is, and some of the really insensitive things that can be said at church that people don't realize come across
Yeah.
as insensitive, and they're not meant to, but they can be really painful, and they can be triggers for people if they're really struggling and they just don't want to put themselves in that place again, which I completely understand. So anyway, that's I just wanted to have a place where we could share stories, and where women could listen in and be reminded that they're not alone in all this. So that was kind of the push for the podcast.
I think you said something great there, that people say things that are insensitive sometimes, but they don't mean to hurt us. They just say things that slip because it's just not part of their day-to-day life to think about how that could hurt somebody. So I think it's important we remember to forgive those people that say things, and to not let what they say keep us from going to church. And like Mother's Day, I need to get to a point where I can go to church on Mother's Day. And but I like that you said that, you know, people say things and they don't mean to hurt us.
Well, and I have to remember too, like, how many times have I said something that, I'm oblivious to some private struggle that someone else is going through. And so whatever I've said could be really painful for them.
Yeah.
And I don't realize it. I don't know it. I wasn't trying to be insensitive, but yeah, even whatever it is, just talking about marriage or family or employment or health or so many things that, these blessings that we take for granted when things are going right in our lives, that not everyone, they don't go right all the time for everyone. And so I'm sure there are times when I have said things that have been painful to other people that definitely have not been intentional on my part. So that's something I've tried to remember, like, no one is out there trying to offend people and, send these little daggers into your heart. It just happens because we're mortal and we go through these things, and we have emotions and we have triggers and we're sensitive and hormones, good grief. So, yeah, grace. I think we just all need grace, to show each other grace, to have grace shown to us, grace from the Lord. We just all need grace. And I think that's the only way we get through some of these things.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about your health issues. How has that affected your view on your infertility?
So I was in my early 30s before I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but I'm sure my thyroid was malfunctioning for most of my adult life, just based on how I felt and symptoms I had that were just kind of, I just figured this was normal. This is what everyone goes through, but it's not. Anyway, my thyroid was taken out completely when I was like 32, I think, around there.
So
And
before you were ever even married.
yes, yes. And I remember asking my endocrinologist, sharing some concerns that it would affect my fertility. And she just dismissed it like, no, this is not gonna, don't worry. Like, there were a lot of conversations that happened leading up to that looking back, I'm like, oh, I probably would have done things differently. But I was just very trusting of the medical world and their recommendations. And so, yeah, my thyroid coming out is something that I'm sure did not help my fertility formula. But then I also have this adrenal insufficiency that, has developed in the last few years. I was diagnosed with the Addison's about 3 years ago. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that because it can get a little bogged down, but it's basically my adrenal glands not working. And so I don't create cortisol, and I have to take steroids every day, multiple times a day for the rest of my life. So yeah, like I try not to be bitter about particularly like my thyroid having come out because I don't think it was necessary completely. I think there were other things we could have done before we got to that step that we just kind of bypassed completely. So whether or not that would have changed my fertility picture, who knows? If I want to feel resentful and bitter, yeah, I could blame it all on the endocrinologist that took my thyroid out. But that's not fair. And so I don't know, I'm sure these health conditions have contributed. There may be other things we don't realize, playing a factor. I I will say this, going through some of the health things that I have gone through have definitely made me just grateful for the health that I do have. And so if I'm not going to be able to have a baby, okay, I still have this body that like works so well for me. And I guess I will share like when I went through this Addison's diagnosis, it was like a year plus leading up to it where I was really sick and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And like my body was literally slowly shutting down. And if we hadn't had gotten it diagnosed shortly, like it really wouldn't have gone well. So, because you can't live without cortisol, things just start shutting down. And I was kind of in this low grade crisis for months. And I luckily, I guess, kind of ironically, like I lost my job around that time. So I wasn't working and I really wasn't doing anything. Like I just had no energy and was pretty much living on the couch. And I would get up for like big commitments, like to show up for my young women's calling and to go to church and maybe pick up groceries, once a week. And I guess in that way, it was providential that I didn't have children to be raising because I'm not sure what that would have looked like. Although I will say there are women with poor health that have kids and they figure out a way to do it and they get help or whatever it is or the kids just go through stuff and grow up soon or whatever. You'll hear that argument like, oh well, it's a good thing that you don't have kids because what would that have been like? And like, well, we would have figured out how to make it work. And people do that all the time. How many young moms go through breast cancer or whatever it is. So, but in the end, yes, I am incredibly grateful for my health in a way that I wasn't before. So I literally wake up in the morning and I am, that is my prayer of gratitude. Like I am grateful that I woke up this morning and that, that I'm breathing, my limbs are working, I can think, I can move. Mornings are still rough for me, but I can take my steroids and know that things are going to start kicking in the next hour or two. And so I have a lot of gratitude for my body and for the healing that it has gone through because of the conditions that I've had. So the infertility, yeah, is still sucky and painful. But if my body isn't going to work in that way, at least I can appreciate all the other ways that it is working. And I say that, but I'm sure I'm also, mostly oblivious to all the ways that it is working because we take stuff for granted that is working well. So, but I do have a lot of gratitude for my health because of that.
Definitely. Okay, so let's bring this back to faith and the church. You've mentioned some ways how being in church can be hurtful. How about some ways that maybe being in church has been helpful through this journey?
So much of my identity is tied to, I don't want to say to the church, but to the gospel, to the gospel of Jesus Christ and what it looks like to live the gospel. So yes, to the church as well. And so being able to connect with others, particularly through callings, I think has been really helpful for me. So service, of course, we know is something that can help us when we're struggling or, just needing to get outside of ourselves and our own challenges, if we focus on other people. And so the church gives us those opportunities in abundance. And I think there are certain callings or situations, dynamics like presidencies and stuff where there's an opportunity to serve with other people. And, just depending on how things go, like you can end up developing friendships with those people that you otherwise never would have developed, but because you're serving together, you just kind of create these relationships. And then all of a sudden you have these connections to more people. And the more people you're connected to and feel connected to, the more you feel like you belong. And so I think that definitely has been a helpful factor for me as far as being involved in the church is serving with other people and feeling connected to them, and as a result feeling like I really have a place in the ward family because of that, because I'm connected to these other people. So beyond that, I mean, the my faith is kind of like you said, the one thing that gets me through some of those hardest times, just trusting in God and in his goodness. And so anything that helps me do that at church, is a good thing. So it's sometimes really funny because it can be sometimes both at the same time, like you can really be struggling. There can be someone who has like said the most insensitive thing. And at the same time, like there's a comment made in Sunday school or from a talk or whatever it is that like really is like a zinger of the Lord reminding you, no, I love you. I have a plan for you. Things are going to work out. This is a good thing that you're here. Stick with me. I've got you. So yeah, it can be both at the same time, which is really interesting sometimes.
Now, you mentioned that your husband is the bishop of your current ward. I'm sure you've heard this before where people say that the bishop is like the father of the ward. How does that feel to be the mother of the ward? Do you feel like it puts expectations on you since you don't have children, or now that all the ward is your child?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. So that phrase kind of just came up on Mother's Day. Someone was saying to me like, "Oh, Shannon, you're like the mother of everyone," and they were talking about also how I'd worked in Young Women's with their daughter and whatever. And it was a sweet comment, and I was just tried to just graciously accept it and move on. But I will say, this is in my favor as far as my current calling being in primary. So I feel like I'm removed from a lot of those interactions that could be awkward or could make me like kind of cringe. We're just trying to like get through primary and keep the kids entertained and whatever, get the teachers there. So I feel like I'm blessed in that way that there's some conversations and some interactions that just don't happen because I'm not there. Not that I would dread going to Relief Society or anything. We've got great, great women. And our ward is not a ward where I feel a lot of like drama or gossiping. Like that's not our ward, which I'm grateful for, at least how I've experienced it. So anyway, yeah, I guess you technically, if you want to call him the father of our ward, that's his role. And although he's more like the young men than anyone else. So, and I just play the organ during sacrament meetings. So I'm already like up in the corner of the chapel. And then I go directly to primary, which is on the complete opposite side of the building as where any of the other adults are. So I'm kind of like removed from everyone else, it feels like, unless they're in primary, which has a trade-off. It means I don't have those opportunities to stay connected as easily. I have to go out of my way, but then I connect with the people in primary, and we're just focused on the kids and on sharing God's love with them, and so that's good.
Is it hard for you at all to work in primary? I know I've avoided it. I've actually declined some callings to work in primary because it was too hard for me at the time. Is that hard for you at all?
Not right now, as far as for that reason. There might have been times in the past where I would have struggled. That hasn't been the hardest part of it for me. I mean, I also came from a background where I was, teaching elementary school music for a couple of years. Then I was working with children in the hospital. So I've done a lot of working with children that are not my own. And, there's just, an awareness, yeah, these are other people's kids. And so I interact with them in a certain way, as a teacher, or as a clinician. They're not my kids to raise, and I'm here for a specific purpose, and how I'm interacting with them. So I don't know. Yeah, primary is right now it's good. But I totally get that it could very easily be a trigger or just a hard place to be. So it gets so chaotic sometimes in a fun way, in a good way. And the kids can be so sweet, those little ones, that it does feel part of the whole, which is ironic,
Yeah.
because it's like the lack of that causes the whole. And I felt that with my nieces and nephews too. Like sometimes it's like you want to be so, just hurt and resentful that, everyone else has these sweet, precious children and they're not yours. And then, but, they share them with you and they come up and can be so sweet and loving and kind. And it does fill the hole in a lot of ways. So, kind of, I guess, ironic the way that works. But yeah, that's at least how I've experienced it.
Is there anything else that you feel you want people to know about infertility or your journey through it?
I will share one thing that has helped me as far as support from others. I sometimes have had friends who have, they're aware that we haven't been able to have kids, and so they want to be supportive, and it's kind of like they want me to know that they know and they're aware and they're trying to reach out, and so they just will, every now and then just, so how are you doing with the infertility? Like they'll just bring it up out of the blue, and that never works for me. Like it's not a natural way for me to express anything. I usually will be like, "Oh, well, it is what it is," or something, and not that, of course, like it's all coming from a good place, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that people want to support, but the times that have been most helpful are when I have been in a friendship, in a conversation where I have just felt completely safe and comfortable, and I bring it up. Maybe I graze the topic lightly. Usually whoever I'm talking to, they get very, focused and responsive and attentive and supportive, and then I may or may not go deeper into it. And like I honestly don't talk about it a lot. It's not something that I feel the need to just unload, about how painful it is, how hard it is in regular casual conversation, because it's kind of a downer and people don't know how to respond except like, I'm so sorry, like, have you thought about adoption? Which, that'll be a whole nother episode we talk about. And, this people can be different. Maybe there are people that want you to just ask them how they are doing with their infertility. But for me, that has never been helpful. Just be a friend, be kind, be genuine, be natural, and don't feel like you need to ask these most like private questions that are painful. If you know that someone's going through infertility, you can just assume that it's hard and that friendship is a good thing for them and that nothing needs to be forced, and don't have really any expectations for how they'll respond or what they need. Just be a good friend. That's what's been most helpful for me. So I guess that was the one thing I kind of wanted to share.
I don't know if you remember when the church switched how they were doing adoptions or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I got so many text messages and Facebook messages and people posting on my wall the information that the church was switching how they did adoptions. And I was just like, that's great, but I don't need this right now. So, yeah, people love us and want to be helpful, but they just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And
It's hard,
yeah,
I get it. So we're not being critical of those efforts by any means.
yeah.
It's just not helpful
The
usually.
best thing is just to
So
say you love us and have a
yeah.
good day.
Yeah. Or let's go play pickleball, whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
or D&D, what, like,
yeah. That's another good question. Do you feel like people treat you differently because you don't have children? Like, okay, let me explain. For me, I feel like so many moms in the ward get together to do playtime, and so that's how they create friendships because they're getting their kids together to play or something. And I don't have kids, so I don't get invited to absurd things. Even when I had foster kids, I felt like I still didn't get invited because the foster kids were different than the other kids. And I don't know if I'm asking the question the right way, but does that sound familiar?
yeah, no, I think you highlight something for sure that I've experienced, in that you don't, there are so many of those interactions that happen around people's kids, whether it's school things or church things, like so much of what parents are doing in interacting with other people, is focused around their kids. And so we don't have those natural interactions. And it's not that anyone is excluding us. It's our circumstances are excluding us. It's just the fact that we don't have a child, in this class or in this activity or at the soccer game or whatever it is. So I definitely have felt that kind of like being left out. I don't know if I would say people have treated me differently, as it's more of just like the natural course of how people live their lives. And you get to be friends with the people you do life with, and you do life with people who are in similar circumstances to you. And kids are a big part of that. So it just means we have to work a little harder sometimes. I will say, like, my current ward right now is not super heavy on a lot of young families, which is kind of nice. So there's a lot of older people, well established, singles and couples and whatever. So it's an opportunity to just build my circle, with them and whatever. And that's fine. It's good. So I have had a couple comments where people have said, oh, you wouldn't understand. You don't have kids. Particularly when I was serving in the youth. And it wasn't said in like a judgmental way, it was more of just like them venting about their kid, and then kind of like a just after that, oh, you wouldn't get it. You don't have to go through this, almost like a be grateful you don't have to go through this, which I understand, the validity of that sentiment when you're going through something really hard with your kid. But yeah,
But
even
they
the
don't
bad thing.
understand how much we want to go through that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get that it's hard, and I wrote about this in the book too. Like, I understand that I'm not gonna understand it all, until I'm a parent. So there's just you won't have the understanding and the love, the depth of that love until you're a parent. I get that, and I get that it's really hard and painful, and I understand all that conceptually, and still it is what I want.
Anything else you want to share?
I don't know. I'm just grateful for anyone that is listening. And I hope that if you have any interest in sharing your own story, that we can connect and give you that opportunity as well. Like we said in the beginning, this can be a really heavy topic. And I feel like maybe you need to be in the right frame of mind to even listen to this podcast episode. And I also will say, if for some reason you're listening to this and you're not struggling with infertility, but you're thinking of someone who is, and you would like to share this with them, be really prayerful about that. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, people assuming, oh, this will help so and so. This is what they need because they're struggling with this. It could, it might, but probably don't make that assumption. Uh,
Wait till they bring up the thought, maybe.
Yeah. Like if someone came to me and said, hey, I just saw this, infertility podcast that you might enjoy, I'd probably be like, oh, cool. Thanks. And
Yeah.
then I might go and look it up later on and really love it or whatever, so, but it's still, I would just kind of be sensitive and prayerful about some of those things before you assume something will be helpful for someone in a really sensitive situation.
Yeah. And I think if people have questions, we can always try and give answers or answers from our point of view to any
Yeah.
questions that people might have.
Yeah. And if we don't want to answer something, we won't,
Yeah.
like we'll give a really vague response, and there you go.
Yeah.
That's as much as you'll get. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, we can kind of wrap up here, and we'll consider this our intro episode. And next time we'll have Pam sharing more details of
Mm.
her story,
Be
her
prepared
journey.
for tears.
Okay, we'll get the tissues out. And if you're listening, we hope that you'll come back and join us for more of these conversations. We are trying to build up a Facebook group, so feel free to go on there and look for Full Faith Empty Arms LDS Infertility. We're in just the very beginning stages of it, so there's not much going on yet, but get on there and help us build it so that we can connect with each other and support each other. And then I also wanted to share this quote from Elder Uchtdorf, who's like my favorite. This has been hanging in my bathroom for years. He said, never stop hoping for all of the righteous desires of your heart, but don't close your eyes and hearts to the simple and elegant beauties of each day's ordinary moments that make up a rich, well lived life. So, with that, I think Pam and I both just want to remind anyone who's listening that you're not alone in this if you're going through infertility. And I think we both truly believe that the best is yet to come. So, thanks for being with us. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. We know we are not professionals and there's probably some sound issues that need to be improved, so we appreciate your patience as we get better with all of this. We also want to invite anyone who would like to share their story to reach out to us. We have a Facebook group called Full Faith Empty Arms LDS Infertility that we are trying to get started and grow. We're also on Instagram, Full Faith Empty Arms. So feel free to reach out to us through either of those channels. And please go on and find those pages and help us gain a little bit of momentum there so that more people will see some resources out there for support. Because there are probably a lot of people who can relate to your unique struggle. We just have to connect. Thanks so much.